This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
All right, folks, so it's our 10th episode this week, and we have a bit of a longer show for you. We'll start with listener mail, which, as usual, might take some unexpected turns. We'll end the show with an interview that I had with my friend, musician, and writer Mo Troper. This is something that I talked about doing a couple weeks ago after that really special MJF promo, and we were able to finally record it for this week. And I do realize it's not quite as timely, but I do think it's still a really meaningful discussion that him and I have. And so that's at the end of the show. And so we start off talking about that MJF promo, specifically in how it relates to Mo's experience as a Jewish man in 2022. And that'll be at the end of the show. And then him and I will go into kind of just like a more general kind of friendly conversation that you can stick around and listen to if you'd like. And so yes, all this and more coming up in a minute.
Jungle Boy, MJF, Sammy Guevara, and Darby Allin, all elite, highly esteemed. Wrestling's back on the Turner Network. Whether you're tough or radical, or a thing that is your right, we got the DMV and CMO and more on your AEW podcast.
Welcome in, wrestling fans, and you're listening to The Next Pillar, your AEW podcast, where each and every week we bring you a blend of entertainment and insight inspired by the latest goings-on in All Elite Wrestling. You can find us at nextpillaraew.com. If you'd like more information and like to submit something to our mailbag, our listener mailbag, which we'll get to here in a sec, you can email us at nextpillaraew@gmail.com if you don't want us to have your email, which a couple of people asked me why I made that form on the website, and it was because I had a couple people tell me that someone might want to leave a comment but not leave their email, and it actually has led to some pretty interesting comments, which, by the way, I did verify were actual people. Yeah, I do the work, folks. I'm also on Twitter myself at Blake on Wax, and we are also on Twitter at NextPillarAEW. And I actually did have someone write in once who basically just like made fun of the fact that the show Twitter has no followers, but that's because the only person that I'm following on that Twitter account is Tony Khan, and that's a joke, and I'm not going to ruin that bit, to gain followers. I mean, we've all seen those guides. But that's just my truth when it comes to the Next Pillar Twitter account. Who else do you need to follow? I am the world's biggest AEW mark, so yeah, clearly I'm only going to follow Tony Khan. Who else do you need to follow? And I'll be honest. A friend of mine actually asked me, like, what would you do if you found out that Tony Khan had listened to the show or knew about the show? And the more I think about it, the more I realize that it's really like an either or scenario where either Tony Khan will never listen to the show or Tony Khan has always been listening to the show. And don't make me explain that, but that's just what I feel. I feel that to my very core. So on to listener mail. This is a funny one that I wanted to show. First off, this is definitely the funniest one that I've gotten. And that's that someone sent in a screenshot of Jon Moxley where on Dynamite, he was wearing a tank top for a lot of his match. He would go on to take it off, but at first he came out in the tank top. And someone sent this with the caption of Renee Paquette is scared of Blake's wife, which is really funny, of course. If you didn't hear that particular episode, I had my wife on. I like to get her thoughts for the pay-per-views, because I think she has some interesting insights sometimes. And one of those insights was that she has a really strong attraction to Jon Moxley's chest hair, which I'm fine with. I mean, it's Mox. I got his book. You know, he's my guy. That's fine. But yeah, just the idea that, I mean, Renee Paquette would hear that and be like, you think you're gonna go out to the ring wearing that, is really funny. And, I mean, my wife is a 34 double D with perfect pitch, you know? I mean, she's a threat. Andrew wrote in asking about Ring of Honor. And that's just, would I do a Ring of Honor podcast if Ring of Honor becomes an actual thing? And, of course, this person also makes this joke, and you know Tony Khan is involved. I definitely would not do a show like this about Ring of Honor. That is for sure. But if Ring of Honor ends up being, you know, like, even if it is just like AEW NXT, I'll definitely be talking about it on the show from time to time. And I don't know, I might even, like, maybe one really mean person once wrote in and said that I would be, like, really good as a co-host on someone else's show, which is one of those things that was, like, mean and hurt my feelings because I kind of knew it was true on some level. You know, I'll admit that. But yeah, I was just like, damn. But with Ring of Honor, no, I will not be doing a, you know, the next pillar but Ring of Honor, you know, where my wife sings about Bandito and you know, Jonathan. What song would we write about Jonathan Gresham? Like, we did a riff on, you know, Octopussy, like the theme from Octopussy, but about Jonathan Gresham, you know. That would be really weird because that's one of the Bond themes that's, like, super serious. Which, yeah. Okay, so now that I'm talking about this and actually thinking about it, that actually does sound pretty cool. And that's how this stuff starts. And speaking of things being started by our listeners, I believe it was like last Thursday or Friday morning, you know, I've got my coffee set up. I got a chorizo breakfast burrito from Don Pedro. And believe me, if you're from the Portland area and you don't know about Don Pedro, especially my guy Don Pedro number 7, you guys are missing out. But in any case, my favorite thing is that about Don Pedro is they put this very detailed sign in the door explaining why they needed to raise the breakfast burrito price by a quarter. I love that place. Anyway. And one of you on Twitter sends me this clip from the Ringer Wrestling show, and don't worry, so I have a 1-minute timer here, just to make sure that things don't get out of hand like they did the other show. You know, I've talked about this Ringer stuff before, but we had someone write in about the Ringer. And, you know, so how do I reconcile these two things of people not wanting the show to be dominated by negativity, yet also wanting the show, you know, to sometimes have some media criticism? This is what I've come up with. It's a new segment called 1 Minute Burial. Okay, so before we start here, I had to get everything ready. So basically this clip, and you can see my thoughts, you know, again, at Blake on Wax, because I did weigh in on this after someone sent it to me. The clip that was sent to me was ultimately not what this is about, and not that interesting, although I did think it was really funny that it literally started with somebody whining about how there's too much WWE bashing. But obviously, you know, that got my juices flowing, and so, you know, I pull up the Ringer Wrestling show and I click on the transcript. I just want to be clear, like, I'm not listening to this fucking garbage, like at this point anymore. It's more of like from time to time you dip into the transcripts to see if there's any nonsense going on, and I can't thank this listener enough, because I did find some nonsense going on. I found one of the dumbest things that I've heard on a wrestling podcast. I wanted to play it, and also not just because, you know, I'm trying to do this 1 minute burial segment, but more importantly, because the kind of stupid that this is perfectly illustrates something that I need to say today. So rather than paraphrase or paraquote, you can just give it a listen.
And I think for that reason alone, I'm more excited about the Jeff Hardy signing, because I feel like Jeff Hardy is definitely winding down in his career. And I think there's a lot of untold story. I think if they, you know, obviously I've said this for many, many months. I really do think AEW could truly benefit from some creative writing and somebody who can really craft out some stories, because I think a story with Jeff Hardy truly, you know, truly exercising like all the shit that he's been through in his career, this is the best way to really finish that story, right? Like Matt Hardy's there, Sting's there, Darby Allin's there. And just those three people alone tell so much of the Jeff Hardy story that you can't really tell in WWE, right? Like you always hear about this man and his demons and yada, yada, yada. But like a Jeff Hardy Sting face-to-face sit down, I'm tuning in to just have them just talk about that. Right? Darby Allin, who, you know, as soon as he came into AEW, Chris Jericho, first thing he said was he reminds me of a young Jeff Hardy. And obviously you can see the Jeff Hardy influence in a lot of things he does. And of course, the reunion of the Hardy Boys. I think there's a lot of story to peel back there, man. And, you know, obviously AEW has no shortage of fantastic wrestlers. I don't think fantastic wrestling is what they need more of. I think what they need more of is very interesting, you know, biting storytelling.
Okay. I just gotta get everything going here and go. Yeah, biting storytelling. Like Finn Balor at SummerSlam biting storytelling, or Big E's title reign biting storytelling. And again, you know, that's what is upsetting about these dudes, is that they will sit here on a show and put the screws to AEW, and of course there are some valid criticisms, but this is the same dude who later in the show talks about Ricochet winning the Intercontinental title being a sign that the WWE is building new stars. And I'll bring this up again later, but this guy is just so emblematic of a larger problem, and that's not even getting into the fact that on a weekly basis, this dude is obviously doing the Seymour Skinner, I'm going to see how much ass I can kiss today, and then I'll see how much ass I can kick next week and break my record to maintain my own sanity. So moving on from all the negativity, you know, at least a bit in tone, why I wanted to bring this particular quote to all y'all's attention is that it's so obvious to see, you know, when you actually put these people on the spot and ask them to create something of their own. The idea that they have is, you know, a 25-minute scripted promo with Jeff Hardy, Darby Allin, and Sting. Like, that's your 25-minute scripted promo. And, you know, I just want to be clear about this. It's like, yeah, obviously at some point in this Jeff Hardy run, I expect that him and Sting, probably fairly soon, will have some sort of reconciliation about that whole Victory Road situation. You know, I imagine at some point CM Punk will have a reckoning of sorts with Jeff Hardy about some things that were said or happened in their feud. Those are things that we expect, knowing that AEW really values this rich tapestry that is the history of wrestling. Those are things that we expect, you know, but the idea that this needs to be like an episode of Intervention or, frankly, some show that's much worse, which, by the way, I mean, you look at how stupid this guy is and you just wonder, like, wow, you couldn't make it at WWE? Like, your ideas were that bad? But we see here, clearly that they were. And yeah, the idea that, what I really wish that they could do is have a, scripted promo, with Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy and and Darby Allin and all these people who, the minute you try to tell their story for them, it falls apart. And that's because of something that's very simple that I was thinking about yesterday. And that's just that the story of Jeff Hardy that needs to be told, the only story, is Jeff Hardy's story. So let me just say that again. The story of Jeff Hardy that needs to be told is Jeff Hardy's story. That is literally the thing that people are wanting to see. And by people, I mean the real fans of the Hardy Boys, but also I mean real wrestling fans. I saw quite a few places people talking about, are the Hardys really a thing still? Or talking about how underwhelming their last WWE runs were, which, gee, wonder why. But that's not what's going on here. Like, this isn't the Hardy Boys doing one more WWE thing with the Hall of Fame thing. Like, this is the Hardy Boys going to AEW, and for the first time in so long, actually getting to be the Hardy Boys again. There are some valid criticisms, to be sure, but this stuff right here is something that Tony Khan understands. And, I think 20 years from now, when we talk about the successes and failures about AEW in its first 20 years of existence or whatever, I think that Tony's understanding of that in regards to storytelling will be one of the main reasons, that AEW, if it's proven to be successful, which I think it will be, that is one of the main things that people, many of whom will be wrestlers, will point to as to, why they went to AEW or why they stayed in AEW. And that's really the next test, is seeing who stays in AEW. And again, it's like so telling where with these guys, it's like, who are the only AEW wrestlers that they talk about liking? The ones where it's really obvious and they probably even know personally that there's some interest in, like MJF and some of Wardlow and some of these other people. And there's something to that. Like, this guy isn't going on there and talking about Daniel Garcia, you know what I mean? Which is a damn shame. That's my main criticism of the Ring of Wrestling show. Where is the Daniel Garcia talk? Thank you. And something, that I've heard mentioned elsewhere is just the question of, do the Hardy Boys still matter? And again, we can revisit some of their last WWE runs, or, a valid criticism of, can they still go in the ring? My hunch is yes. And, you even saw, I don't remember who reported this, but there was a report that part of why the WWE did that Jeff Hardy Hail Mary to try to get him to sign up for the Hall of Fame is that they feared that the Hardy Boys could be revitalized in AEW, which is easy to see. I know there's been a lot of discussion about, maybe Matt isn't moving too well these days, and how Jeff looked in his last WWE run. But again, this is the Hardy Boys in AEW, and as much as that means, and I'll talk about this more later, to Hardy Boys fans or to wrestling fans, you think about how much that means to Matt and Jeff Hardy, whether you're a huge Hardy Boys guy or not. Two of the most dynamic wrestlers, wrestling minds of the past 30 years. Yeah, I'll say that. the idea that they are going to approach this AEW run and not totally knock it out of the park, well, I just say, like, a lot of people have bet against Jeff Hardy. I wouldn't be the one to bet against Jeff Hardy, honestly. And, you know, it's like, you know, this is language that people like that can understand. That Jeff Hardy debut video had 1.2 million views on YouTube in 24 hours. And so the questions of, do the Hardy Boys still matter? Those questions should be settled by now. But I wanted to take some time to explain why the Hardy Boys are important to me personally and some of my friends I haven't spoken to in a long time. And more importantly than that, I do want to explore this idea of, you know, just what makes the Hardy Boys great. But first, I need to tell a story. So it was the fall of 1999, and it was the first worst time of my life. My mom and I decided that after years, decades for her, of my dad's verbal and occasionally physical abuse, that it was time for us to leave. So one day, my mom filed for divorce, and we started planning for what we had hoped would be a peaceful new chapter for the both of us. The problem was that due to a variety of legal reasons and other things that I still don't really understand to this day, we had to stay there for, at that time, we were told possibly might be years. It ended up being about a year. And you may be thinking to yourself, yeah, you know, if my dad was, you know, comfortable treating us fairly poorly before he knew we were leaving, you can imagine how he started acting the day he got those divorce papers. It was a very difficult time, but I did soon realize that I wasn't alone. At the time, my high school was one of the worst in the state. In fact, literally, when I was attending there, the dropout rate was the highest in the state. And in fact, this might surprise you, here in Oregon, one of the highest on the West Coast at that time. The school itself was built by an architect who, and this was back in the 70s, thought that students might excel in an environment, this is a quote, free of distractions. So, yeah, this is where this is headed. Yes, my high school had no windows. Every single classroom had no windows. There was a wall of windows in the cafeteria, and that was it, basically. And so if you're already kind of picturing, you know, this school might look kind of like a prison, you should also keep in mind that there was literally a giant metal gate that was raised and lowered each day to allow the Cisco truck to come in and give us our French bread pizza and chocolate milk. This is something that I remember many of us referring to as the prison door. And, you know, this was Oregon, obviously. But, you know, it's like I was talking to my wife about this the other day. There is just something different about the experience of growing up as a child and maybe having the lights get shut off, or maybe having to move where, you know, you can tell that your parents don't really want to. It's a different kind of childhood, you know, and I'm not saying that my experience was terrible or even really that noteworthy, but there's a particular kind of alienation that comes from growing up poor, especially in the 1990s. Not especially, but particularly, there's a particular kind of alienation that comes from being poor in the 90s. And a big part of that is because we were also being told by our parents that we could literally grow up to be anything that we wanted. And of course, the classic baby boomer thing is to tell your kids that, but not really explain, you know, how they can go about being what they want to be, let alone explaining the structural barriers of society that many of us have, to say nothing of some of the developmental disabilities that many of us were dealing with at the time, that seem very obvious looking back on it. So we were told that we could do anything, but wasn't really explained what we should do, and we really weren't warned that actually you can't do anything that you want to do, for all intents and purposes. And yeah, I went through the entirety of my high school, and indeed until I was, almost 30, before finding out that I had ADHD, likely dyspraxia and some other things. And some of you who have made fun of my vocal tics are now feeling bad. But yes, I looked at this progress report just the other day, where I had 109 absences. Sophomore year is when I really started skipping classes. The funny thing about skipping classes is that the more you skip classes, the more you meet people who are also people who skip classes. And so kind of apart from, the circles of friends that I had already had in high school, I also had this kind of crew of people that I would skip class and occasionally hang out with. I remember one day my friend Marshall stole a case of Pepsi from the student store, and all of us would shake up the cans of Pepsi and throw them as hard as we could against the wall by what we called the prison gate. And, thinking about it now, I can still, hear that wet thud that the cans made, and remember watching, just these thick brown jets of soda foam bounce, off the beige colored concrete. I should also mention, I think about, some of the people that were there with us that day. That was the first trans person that I have been friends with. I met actually that exact day with the Pepsi cans, who is now doing some really amazing performance art. And I realize, that their experience, or, I think about in this group of kids, was one of the 7 black kids that went to my school. And, I realize that their experience is a more important and probably more interesting story to be told. But today my story happens to be the only one that relates to wrestling. Sophomore year was also the year I fell in love with wrestling. I've told this story before about going to Memorial Coliseum for wrestling, but this was different. What happened with me this year was different. I remember sneaking past my art teacher to get on his computer, and so that I could start loading WWF.com on his browser. It of course took several minutes, so I would sneak in to start it, close the window, go to the back of the room, then when he left again, go to the front of the room, open the window, and hopefully it had loaded there and I could see what was going on, with Mick Foley and what was on Bite This that week. The other thing about sophomore year is that it was the year that I met Mark. I met Mark skipping class, obviously. Mark was one of the punk kids at school, but he was also the only punk kid that was actually making punk music at that time. And him and I were in the same class, and I had read a poem in that class about the time that my dad hit me in the face. I was in 3rd grade, and he hit me in the face. He didn't like how I was decorating the Christmas tree, which, I'm sure my wife is listening to this and thinking, oh, that's why he doesn't like decorating the Christmas tree. But yeah, the reason why I wrote about that in class is that was the first time that I had remembered feeling scared of my dad. And so Mark gave me a tape of his that he had recorded, and I remember the 3rd song on the first side of that tape was called My Dad, and he did this thing where, and it was actually really kind of sophisticated looking back on it, each verse of the song was about him hiding from his dad in a different room in the house. And I remember thinking at the time, that this tape was really pretty rough for the most part, but I remember thinking at the time, that he was really on to something with this song. And my friendship with Mark, who, honestly, I would almost even call him more of an acquaintance, to be honest, and I have tried to reconnect with him, but am just completely unable to find him, by the way, because I'm sure that's a question that might come up. But my friendship with Mark led to this very formative moment where I remember our school had a battle of the bands, and this band of popular kids, you know, they could like barely string together this like Green Day cover set. And When I Come Around is one of those, by the way, is one of those songs where if a band, only a really bad band can fuck that song up. But you know, I remember just watching this terrible cover set, you know, to great applause from my fellow classmates, where, you know, meanwhile, by the time it was Mark to play his solo electric guitar set, you know, no one was there other than me and, you know, a few of us that were friends with each other. By the way, that Green Day cover band, I'm joking, obviously, I think they'd probably be like ambient dudes. I think that would be the vibe with that. One thing about Mark, though, is that at that time, Mark was not one of my wrestling buddies. But I do remember him coming to watch the 2000 Royal Rumble at my house. This was back in the day, you know, of cable and pay-per-view. Crazy how, you know, far we've gone. Mark, you know, interestingly enough, was not one of my wrestling buddies. But I remember him coming to watch the 2000 Royal Rumble at my house. I think, which, think about that as your first wrestling event, by the way. That, yeah, you got the Hardys and the Dudleys and the Cactus Jack, Triple H, and the Rumble. Very good. Anyway, and that's why, you know, it's like my wife sometimes asks me, like, how are you having parties where people were coming over and watching wrestling? And it's like, well, that's because, like, even someone that you usually wouldn't watch wrestling loved watching wrestling during this time. It's just one of those things that's hard to explain. And hopefully we can go back there again. I hope so. Anyway, this was Mark's first wrestling event that he had seen. And I remember this very vividly. You know, as the Hardy Boys come out, I remember him saying, you know, oh, I had no idea, you know, that wrestlers could be like this, you know, and look like me, is what he said. Obviously, I should have mentioned this. Mark was very much like a punk-looking guy with the dyed hair and the stick and pokes and the just everything you would expect. And so, look, you know, I am not the world's, like, biggest Hardy Boys fan. But, you know, I was emotional seeing Jeff Hardy, you know, dance on that entrance ramp, which, by the way, of course he danced on the entrance ramp. Of course he did. That's what makes pro wrestling fun, is what Jeff Hardy dancing on the entrance ramp as his brother's getting his ass kicked. Like, if you don't like that, like, you don't like wrestling. That's just how it is. But yes, you know, I'm not the world's biggest Hardy Boys fan, but it's like, look, you know, for me, it's like, you know, I think about CM Punk being gone for 7 years, and it really was like, for 7 years, the bat signal was up and no one was getting it. And I know, you know, I'm a 38-year-old man with 2 kids, but that little 3rd grade boy is still somewhere deep inside me. You know, he went somewhere deep inside me as my dad got crazier, and that little boy is still somewhere inside me. And so, you know, when I get a text message, you know, from my friends who one of my friends, you know, I haven't talked to in a very long time, who, you know, just is like, oh, I was looking on Facebook that you're doing this wrestling podcast. I just watched AEW for the first time. I haven't watched wrestling, you know, since we were in high school, but I saw that, you know, Jeff Hardy had been on. That kind of connection, you know, that is the kind of thing that gives you, you know, 1.2 million YouTube views in a day for that Hardy's debut. That's the kind of thing that, you know, makes my friend like that reach out. It's what made that's what has made, so many other friends of mine who I know love the Hardys, where we've engaged in conversation, and all of us are so ready for to in 2022 in AEW, see the Hardys be the Hardys again. And it's those kind of connections that are things that the WWE brains of the world will never understand. The story of Jeff Hardy that people really care about isn't the suspensions, it's the comebacks. It's not about what happened at Victory Road. Like, we don't need to have obviously Sting and Jeff Hardy talking on TV about Victory Road, that's great TV, but is that great pro wrestling? Because that's what this is all about. So again, the story of Jeff Hardy that needs to be told is Jeff Hardy's story. And that's because Jeff Hardy's story is our story. Okay, so we're back to listener mail. That's right. All that stuff you just heard was just a part of listener mail. It's exactly like that whole, House of Black, Knights of the Black Throne situation. I'm very dynamic. The show is very dynamic, people. Just sleep at your own peril. So we're back to listener mail. And I saved the best for last here. We have VJ emailing in about a question about production stuff. And I saved this for last because VJ is our current leader among listeners who have written into the show, and is among, the listeners that I've talked to who I met and interacted with from doing this show, which is just one of those really cool things that can happen in doing something like this. And so, VJ, if you're comfortable, feel free to email me your address. And something I'll announce right now is that we are working on a show t-shirt. And so if you send me your address, I hope to have these ready by, the summer. So, if you need to slim down to you have a goal in mind, like, I want to be a medium in the summer, so, I'll start thinking about that. Here's some incentive. And, you want to fight, just order that XL. Yeah, right on, just you props, And while we're on the subject, I did want to talk a little bit about HelloFresh. Yeah, that's right. HelloFresh. HelloFresh. So just what is HelloFresh? You're probably asking to yourself. Well, with HelloFresh, you get farm-fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. HelloFresh is 72% cheaper than a restaurant meal of the same quality, and you can save on average over $65 per month when you order HelloFresh instead of grocery shopping. That's more money to put towards those other 2022 goals of yours. Maybe you're wanting to go see New Edition and Jodeci and Charlie Wilson in Oakland this weekend, like me. Well, HelloFresh also offers 50 menu and market items to choose from each and every week, including veggie for the college folk, calorie smart for the and then family friendly, and gourmet options providing plenty of variety. Recipes like hibachi, sweet soy, bavette steak, and shrimp bring restaurant quality meals right to your kitchen, while their right cheddar Wonder Burgers make it easier than ever to skip the takeouts. So, my personal experience with HelloFresh has been just nothing short of great. I love the colors on the packaging. I love the fonts that they use, especially in the packaging. And I've always really just enjoyed it. The word fresh is in the name, but it is just very fresh each and every time I open those boxes. So if you want to be a part of HelloFresh, you can go to hellofresh.com/VOW16 and use VOW16 for up to 16 free meals and 3 free gifts. I'm going to do that. Okay, so back to VJ though. I am just immensely appreciative of, and VJ's not the only one. We have, at this point, a few, that have messaged every week, and many others who just message in from time to time, and thank you. Or maybe less pleasant, but so VJ, his question again, is very insightful. I have been noticing on average that the production has been going downwards steadily for a while. Personally, I love the New Japan style of filming with more limited camera cuts. AEW has become a lot more WWE-esque with the constant camera cuts, although not as bad as WWE, I think he's saying. I wish we could linger on moments, and really AEW has only been dimming certain lights more in the arena so that the audience isn't as visible. I wouldn't mind seeing some empty seats if it meant we could see some fans jumping up, down, and going nuts over every entrance. Have you noticed these changes, and overall, how do you feel about the production of the show? This is a fantastic question, and something that I would love to do a longer segment about is just the production of AEW as a production. Both of those things, which are actually kind of separate now that I think about, but could be had in one discussion. But yeah, AEW's production values. I have so much to say, so much of why. Let me tell you, folks. On a Monday night, what am I doing? Like, you think I'm sitting by the TV watching 3 hours of Monday Night Raw, seeing if Cody Rhodes is going to show up? Even though I'm super interested to see if Cody Rhodes show up, it's just I saw so many of you just pulling your hair out on Twitter, being like, "Oh, this is terrible, and then Cody didn't even show. It's like, what did you think was going to happen? And even if Cody Rhodes did show up, it probably would have been shitty anyway. So yeah, no, I was making some soup, some cow soy, and relaxing with a nice book, and yeah, no, I was not watching 3 hours of Monday Night Raw, and a big part of that is just because of their production values, where it's like VJ is saying with the jump cuts, which is something that has been driving people crazy for how long now, that's like, I do remember back, in the high school days, people were complaining about that stuff on the internet then, and it does stand in such a stark contrast to, like he's saying, just like the way that a lot of other companies have shot and produced wrestling shows. A kind of philosophy which is, so we need graphics for a wrestling show. We got to make sure that they look like graphics for a wrestling show. Where sometimes taking a different approach, can be really helpful for people. or not helpful for people. It can be really effective is what I'm trying to say. I'm just in a good mood today. I don't know. Well, I'll tell you folks, I got my tax return today. I'm also should mention just that I'm going to Oakland this weekend. It's my first time going on a plane since 2008. And I'm going to see New Edition and Jodeci and Charlie Wilson. So, New Edition has been one of my favorite groups for years and very important to me. And I really did not ever think I would get to see them. And so I'm just pretty excited about it. But this isn't a music show. Definitely not. And so we'll move on. But yes, with AEW's production values, yes, the camera cuts often bother me. They also do seem to, and this is something that other people have talked about more than me, they also seem to really miss important parts of matches sometimes, or, expose the wrestler's spots even sometimes. I've seen a couple times. But I feel like with that, it is a relatively young company, and you think about just the head start when it comes to production values that WWE has had, which, by the way, I actually didn't really flesh this out much. I cannot stand just how many graphics, like the graphic overlays, I guess. That is just, again, it's just, it doesn't feel like pro wrestling to me. And, if that's pro wrestling to you, that's cool. It's just when I turn on a wrestling show, like I really am not looking to see a giant sculpture of Roman Reigns' face, you know what I mean, in 3D modeling, like the head of Mario 64 or whatever that you pull on the nose and stuff. And the stuff with that just really, really bothers me is just the stuff that takes you out of the experience of, I want to watch some pro wrestling right now. And of course, WWE does that by design as often as they can. And then they wonder, why their audience is not connecting to really any of their stars outside of, wrestlers who have such charisma that they're able to break through, regardless if the story is shit or not. Shout out to Big E and Bianca Belair, but especially Big E for obvious reasons. And so, you look at the fast cuts with the cameras, you look at the graphics, which, like, I've never felt that AEW has a, signature graphical look. Like, it always just seems like their graphics are trying to look like, oh, we need graphics that look like UFC. Oh, we need and I really feel like they have an opportunity to do something pretty cool if they could actually have a design vision that's just a lot different than a traditional wrestling product. And I really think that, again, when we're talking about this demo that they're pursuing, that they could be on the cutting edge of something like that, and it might make more of a difference than you think. In regards to the lighting, that is interesting. The thought of, is it better to have dim lights and you don't realize that a show isn't sold out, or, is it better to have the lights up so that you can see the crowd, but then, if it's not sold out, then you see all the empty seats. Personally, for me, seeing empty seats takes me out of an experience a lot more than not being able to see the crowd. Because, not being able to see the crowd, I actually remember the first time that I saw them do that on a broadcast. My nerdy ass thought it was cool because I thought it was like theater. Seriously. Yeah. And I'm married, it makes you wonder, don't it? I was like, oh, this is cool. This is like theater, because that is how I relate to wrestling a lot of the time, especially when we're talking about matters of production. And he also mentions, just by the way, that just the extent of Jim Ross and his just this arc of like, oh yeah, it's Jim Ross, and then an hour later you're like, ew. And yeah, I do think it might be worth them looking into, you know, like let's use good old JR for, you know, these important matches that he's invested in that we, you know, can prep him for. Because he does seem out of touch with the product, is something I meant to mention last week but forgot to say, is that he seems really out of touch with the product. And another thing that I forgot to mention in that discussion the other week is that I love Tony Schiavone and think he does an amazing job, especially in the in-ring interviews, but also as a commentator. That's another thing that we had a listener comment about this week, is just someone was taking me to task for not mentioning Tony Schiavone, or they thought that I didn't like Tony Schiavone is what happened, but they thought that because I didn't mention him. And so I wasn't about to let that stand, because after all, who knows, Tony Khan might be listening. He might tell him. And just imagine how you would feel if you hurt Tony Schiavone's feelings. I mean, really. So yeah, no, I appreciate VJ. Thanks for writing in. And yeah, please send me your address, and I will send you a t-shirt when we have them. Again, shooting for the summer, people. So we finally reached our Dynamite preview, and these continue to get smaller each week, but I'm never going to get rid of them. But if you do find yourself, I did have one listener, or it was actually a couple, I think, just that mentioned that they love that it comes out on Wednesday because it's like a fresh preview of Dynamite. But the issue that I've run into, of course, is that sometimes Tony Khan like announces the card like 30 minutes before the show, and so it's like, yeah, like if it's on Wednesday and I'm doing a preview, like I've at least gotten most things, or at least the big things, but then again, there does end up being a match that pops up last minute that I wished I had talked on the show. And also just that I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from, listeners and other folks who I respect, who really like the direction of the show in terms of, like, again, pulling that lens back and using wrestling as a canvas to talk about something else even. And that seems more interesting for me to pursue rather than, being another show, that's more or less, in the week-to-week minutia of things, which, again, can also be really interesting and engaging, depending on how you go about it. But, yeah, just in closing, I really do value the Dynamite preview, and it will still be a part of the show, but it will more and more be a segment like this that's kind of just it's kind of a breeze, it's a light breeze. It's a Dynamite preview breeze just blowing over you. Yeah, it's like a diffuser. It's a Dynamite preview. But yeah, so tonight's edition of Dynamite, and you do wonder if Chris Jericho will be there, and I'm sure he will. And will the Jericho Appreciation Society be there as well? I think they will. And it does make you wonder, though, doesn't it? Just this Jericho Appreciation Society, if they had an entrance theme, what do you think that might sound like? So, looking at this, I'm realizing that this is actually going to be a pretty crazy edition of Dynamite, and I maybe should have put a little more thought into the preview. But, the highlight, of course, is the cage match. Thunder Rosa, Britt Baker. It's going to be interesting if they decide to put the title on Rosa. Just what was the point of that one-on-one match at the pay-per-view? You really do wonder. I feel like in the women's division in particular, there seems to be a lack of like fatal 4-way, 6-way situation. What I would love to see more of that I really miss too, this is a general thing, is just elimination matches, like having a triple threat, but it being elimination. Again, there's plenty of deserving women that deserve these kind of opportunities to wrestle on pay-per-views. And if they were gonna, it's one of those things where either way, whether they have Britt retain or not, I really don't understand what was the point of that pay-per-view match just being a straight-up singles match between the two of them. Again, if they were planning on continuing it, if they were planning on ending it there one way or another, that makes sense. But to do it and then continue it again, it's just it's a little confusing. I'm not really sure where they're going with it. Also on deck for tonight's Dynamite is Wardlow and Scorpio Sky, which is another match with a lot of intrigue that will kind of tip their hands, so to speak, about some long-term storylines. One of those being, you assume that MJF will be a part of this match in some way, shape, or form. And just the other storyline of, this Ty Conti, Sammy versus Paige Van Zant, Scorpio Sky feud, which, if all reports are accurate and that was going to be Cody Rhodes and Brandy Rhodes in that position, Sammy and Ty Conti, talk about an upgrade. Where it's now I'm dying to see this feud, honestly. And I hope it really gives Sammy to sink his teeth, something to sink his teeth into. We've really seen him break through recently. I really feel like that, especially that, segment with him, in the ladder match, having to get the strength to go back. I just feel like we've never really seen that strong emotional side of Sammy before. And I really feel like, you involve his, Ty Conti, and I feel like this has, the potential to be something where Sammy can get out from behind the cue cards, so to speak, and, show us that in addition to becoming one of the best 4 pillars in the ring, he can do it on the stick as well. And I know he can do it, and I would love to see it. This is just, and I'm not saying, that this feud is going to be anything more than just a nice, entertaining feud, but it's just one of those things that has the potential to be, again, just very charming and entertaining. Also on tonight's episode of Dynamite, I think, just as important as anything in the show is, when you look at last week's show, just important as what was on the show was who wasn't on the show, and that's, of course, CM Punk and MJF. And I expect we'll hear from both of them tonight, and it'll be interesting to see what they move on to and what's next for both MJF and CM Punk. And just to see, how they've transformed, from being in this feud. I expect that, that dog match in particular may down the line become, a turning point for either of them. And hopefully for the better, I feel now that we've seen this different side of each of them during this feud, it's like you can't wait to see that side, against all the other talent that AEW has to offer. So yeah, I look forward to that. And I as I was saying earlier, I realize these Dynamite previews have kind of become, underrated, in a similar way as a Ricky Starks or a Powerhouse Hobbs, the Dynamite preview languishes, despite always being here for us, let's be honest. And, despite all the potential it has. But yeah, I do feel bad the Dynamite preview is decreasing, but as I've said, from time to time, not every week, but from time to time, I would really like to use this show as a canvas to talk about some things, or, rather to use wrestling as a canvas to talk about, well, here's where I'm tripped up, because if something's a canvas, you're not going to use it to talk. I mean, I guess it's like you've got a bar chart on it or something. But yeah, I would like to use wrestling as an opportunity to talk about some other things. And so you're about to hear my friend Mo Troper come on and talk a little bit. He is a Jewish artist in 2022, just like MJF. And when I saw that MJF promo, he was the first person that I thought of, and it turns out I wasn't alone. Turns out a lot of people sent him that promo, and so I wanted to get his thoughts on it and use that as an opportunity to talk about what it's like for him to be a Jewish artist in 2022. It's a unique experience, and I just wanted to give him an opportunity to talk about this. So a couple of things I will mention before this discussion starts is that the audio quality is a little weird. He thinks he sounds like he's in a cave, so if that helps you visualize things, by all means. It does sound a little bit here on the Oregon coast. We have quite a bit of coastal caves. It has that vibe, I can't lie. Which I enjoy. And so for my listeners, who aren't familiar, Mo Troper, in my opinion, is the CM Punk of power pop. His pipe bomb being a ranked list of power pop musicians that angered man children across the globe. The man has had his writing published everywhere from Noisy to The Believer. As an artist, his music has been covered on Pitchfork, NPR, Noisy, Paste Magazine, Consequence of Sound, and even on Stereo Gum last year. With great celebration. He's produced for acts like Floating Room, which is the project of Maya Stoner, one of really only 2 or 3 people I've worked with who I actually think are, when it comes to art, completely genius. And they actually just did a massive tour with Citizen and Drug Church. They probably came to a town near you, and maybe you saw them. He's produced records, including just a fantastic recent effort by the band Alkapops. If you like Guided by Voices, and if you want to hear a mix of Guided by Voices and Stephen Merritt, the songs of Leland Braille will appeal to you. He also has produced a record for Brett Irish, who my listeners are familiar with. He is also he is no stranger to any of my friends, and no stranger to his neighborhood Spud Monkeys location. It's Mo Troper, and before I bring him on here, I did want to introduce him also just by playing some of his music. And since we had a proposed wrestling theme earlier in the show, I thought about which of Mo's songs is most like a wrestling entrance music theme, and this song, Jazz from Australia, which has also just been in my mind because the Jericho Appreciation Society, people are just calling it JAS now, is my pick for that. So before this discussion starts, and you can envision him, maybe coming out to the ring as this is blasting. And yeah, we'll have some links in the description in case you want to check out more. And again, this is a discussion with Mo Troper.
From Australia, just from Australia. The best part of every day was talking on the phone. Just from Australia, just from Australia. Bread and butter torn from each other and stuck in different times.
No stranger to any of my friends, and certainly no stranger to his neighborhood Spud Monkeys location. It's Mo Troper. And I say that, I actually don't even know if Spud Monkeys is still open.
Yeah.
I really hope they are. Because, can you imagine, it's Montage, Brunchbox, Grilled Cheese Grill. But, can you imagine if, the two Spud Monkeys survived?
Yeah, that would be... I guess I would be shocked if they were able to weather the pandemic. But, I think that the Flag and Banner store by Lloyd Center is still open.
That's sick.
So you never know.
Did you know that I got my wedding ring at Lloyd Center?
I don't think I did.
Yeah, at one of those super weird jewelry, cheap jewelry stores. I got it for $5.
Was it a kiosk or was it in a actual jeweler inside the mall?
It's one of the inside mall ones. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I forget what it's called, but it's the place that has all the weird gold and stuff.
Crazy.
For the benefit of our listeners, too, I always like the distinction that Spud Monkeys had where they put the possessive on it,
Yes, it's
it wasn't Spud Monkeys, it's belonging to a Spud Monkey.
Right, which is a mistake that I feel like you make a lot as a kid, like Red Robins. Yes. Or Chuck E. Cheese's.
Right.
So yeah, they really got ahead of that one.
Right. Or my dad would just do that, in his 50s.
Yeah.
I think I told you that story about how he really wanted to make... You're familiar with the old spaghetti factory, of course.
Of course.
He really wanted to make the brown butter with Mizithra cheese thing.
Okay.
But of course, being my dad, he tells me, he's like, so I went to New Seasons and I asked everybody there where the Resethro cheese was. And it was crazy. And knowing my dad, he was extremely angry to all of these people in the store. So I would have liked to be a fly on the wall about that. onto the topic at hand, the serious topic. Mo, the reason why I wanted to have you on the show today is just that I feel like you're uniquely qualified to speak to some of the underlying issues that really made this MJF promo the talk of the industry, for a week. And for me, it really made it something that kind of like transcends wrestling. I guess, a commonality between like wrestling and popular music is just that there aren't many cases of successful artists or performers in either medium, really, that make being Jewish like part of their public identity. They may mention being Jewish on occasion, but it's like a much different thing to have it be like a central, like public part of what you're doing. Not to say that you've done that a ton, but for those listening, you had an awesome T-shirt. What was that, last year? That Jewish American rock thing, which I thought was very cool. You have a song on the upcoming Troper 5 record, that references it. So I guess I just wanted to have you on, just to kind of like give you a space to talk about that, because I know that being Jewish is one of those things where there's just not as many spaces to talk about it as there are various other identities. And I should also mention that I'm certainly not trying to detract from any other matter at hand, or say that like the plight of being Jewish in 2022 is somehow worse than something else. You understand what I'm saying?
No, for sure.
But I did want you to just give you an opportunity to kind of sound off on this. So just, I guess, to be more specific, what was your reaction, just like, because I sent you that promo because I really did want your take on it. What was your reaction to watching that?
You sent it to me, and I had seen some other people like sort of in music spheres talking about it. So I do think that there was something about it that was kind of like you're saying, it sort of like transcended the medium. It was like something that a lot of people were talking about, and there were a couple people that, aside from you, who tried to get me to watch it. But it actually took me a second to watch it, and I guess I really wasn't expecting that. It was really pretty emotional. I would say that my reaction, I had a pretty emotional reaction to it. I think that like sort of another important point is that like it's specifically, there is a lack of like secular Jewry, I would say, in popular culture with like pop music and maybe wrestling. I don't know as much about that, but I'd assume that's the case. So it's like, when you have an artist who is really kind of publicly Jewish, it's usually like Modest Yahoo or something, where it's like very, like they're kind of like an Orthodox Jew probably, and there's a very strong religious element to it. So I think that that promo kind of, there wasn't really anything like religious about it. It was like he was really just sort of referring to like the like ethno-national aspect of Judaism, I would say, which I think made it really powerful to someone like me who has never really identified with the religious part of Judaism,
Sure. So, back to that issue of, choosing to make, being Jewish at least more of a part of your public identity than maybe it was, when you and I first met and were doing stuff together. What went into your decision? Or, I know a lot of times you sometimes will, like one of the things that I actually really miss working about you is just that you will sometimes just like turn on a dime on certain things. And you're laughing, but like for me, so much of the difficulty that I have in life in general is decision paralysis. And so it's like kind of one of those things where like I feel like if I could just be in your brain for a day, I could like sort out any number of things. But yeah, so sorry, I kind of...
No, that's interesting.
Yeah, I went off the plot a little bit. But yeah, what went into that? Or did anything go into it, I guess?
No, I think it's been like a pretty unconscious decision. Like, I think when you first talked to me about this or mentioned wanting to have a conversation about this, it wasn't even really like clear to me that was like a new thing. I mean, I think that shirt was, it's like I had to like figure out what that meant in Yiddish, and like my friend who made the shirt actually had to he hand drew. So I guess I'll explain it a little more for the benefit of your listeners. But the shirt is like a Simpsons reference, so it's like Krusty the Clown when he's young, and like there's that episode where Krusty talks about like how he grew up in the Lower East Side of Springfield. I think is the joke. And his dad is like a rabbi who's like a total hard ass and doesn't want him to pursue a career as a clown because he thinks it'll like bring disgrace to their family. And so the shirt is like an image of young Krusty, and it says Jewish American rock music from Portland, Oregon, and then there's a Yiddish translation of that at the bottom of the shirt. And my friend actually couldn't find Hebrew or Yiddish. He couldn't find like a complete alphabet in the Simpsons font, which he thought was really weird because like you can find pretty much every other language. So he had to like hand draw the Yiddish type in the Simpsons style, which is like incredible from a design perspective. But I don't remember, why did I start talking about that?
I think it was good, and I'll have a link, when this is sent out to Spotify and stuff, so that people can see it. But you were very more eloquent in explaining that than I would have been, so I'm glad you
totally.
Sure.
You were asking, so I don't think that there was a decision. I mean, I think it was just like I had an idea for a shirt that seemed kind of like novel to me. I can't really think of like any other bands that have had a shirt like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's exactly why I wanted to have you on to talk about it.
Sure.
Just because MJF has like very pointedly done the same kind of thing in terms of just like I get just having that public persona of having that be a part of the public sphere, your public identity,
right?
And in a medium where I've talked to you about this a little bit, but of course wrestling is full of ethnic stereotypes.
For sure.
And the way that MJF has really subverted that stereotype in a lot of ways. Particularly, I didn't send you this video, but there's a video package that folks will remember where it's very much like the opposite side of the coin of that promo that he gave, which basically like talks about how badass he was in high school. And then just right in the middle of the video, it's like, you've never had Ben's matzo ball soup in downtown, like Long Island. So it's like he also has the like, just like you're saying, like on the Lower East Side of Springfield, like it's also like a very, overt reference to that. I guess part of why this whole topic is interesting to me is just that we haven't seen the same sort of embrace or like, I always hesitate to use this word, but like allyship of, Jewish communities in the same way that we've seen popular culture, support other communities. So why do you think that is? And I guess to like widen the scope there, is there anything central to your experience as like a Jewish American writer and musician, that you wish like more people knew about?
Yeah, I guess it's a good question. Yeah, Jewish American writers and musicians aren't a lot of those.
Well, it's your experience,
Yeah, totally.
Give you a space to share, because I do know you, like MJF, have experienced some adversity because
definitely right. I mean, I think that I grew up in Portland, and so there's not really like a strong Jewish cultural presence here. I think there have only been like 2 or 3 Jewish delis at a time. There's like a really kind of concentrated like Jewish American community in certain parts of the city, but it's not the same as it is like in LA or New York or pretty much any other major city in America. It's like just very not Jewish. And so I think that growing up here, I really denied that part of myself for a long time. And like I really didn't know anybody else who was Jewish, and yeah, I mean, I definitely like experienced a lot of, I guess you would call them microaggressions in Portland that I probably would not have experienced in a place like LA had I gone to high school there.
Yeah.
Like people asking to like touch my hair and sort of like saying all these things that like they obviously didn't know were inappropriate. Like I don't think any of these high schoolers were actually bigots or anything, but it's just like when you're not around like a group of people, you just like you really do start acting like everything is really exotic, sort of. I think that's like how I felt a lot of times, like, oh, why is your skin yellow, like are you jaundiced, like just like kind of stuff like that. And it's
Totally.
like, oh well, I just have like kind of a Mediterranean complexion, it's like so. I think at a certain point when I was like high school age, I was like, I'm just not going to talk about this because it's like more trouble than it's worth, and I don't know anybody else who is like my age and not really religious but Jewish and identifies with this. So I think I just sort of like repressed it for a long time, which is another reason why I think that promo was so powerful and like cathartic, So I think there's an element of like catharsis to owning that now in my early 30s, or late 20s last year, I think that there hasn't really been like. I think in other cities in America and maybe like other parts of the world, like in Europe and stuff, there is more allyship. But yeah, I think when there are like, incidents of anti-Semitic violence or whatever in America, it really kind of doesn't make headlines. And there are not a lot of people.
Yeah.
The people I talk to about it are usually like other Jews, and so, yeah, I couldn't tell you why. I think like, I don't know, like Freud has this idea. Freud is kind of the person who like, he has a book about jokes. I don't know, do you know that book?
I've heard of it, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, on jokes and their relation to the unconscious. So like, he was, I think, the first person to describe like the Jewish consciousness and the Jewish sense of humor, which is pretty interesting because he was, as far as I know, a secular Jew. And like one thing that I'm pretty sure he talks about is like Jews are like sort of like the reason self-deprecating humor is like a characteristic of the Jewish sense of humor, the Jewish consciousness, is because they're like the chosen people who are simultaneously like in exile perpetually.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just like a really good point. And so I think that a lot of times like you do kind of need to like you can't really be not Jewish and embody like the Jewish consciousness or that kind of like distinct feeling of misery, I feel like. And I mean that's the same with like everyone, but I just feel like people don't really know like what it's like to be Jewish, like sort of the they just like assume it's a religious preference, and I guess like in some rare cases it is when people make the insane decision to convert. But
that's like my God, I it's like a second cousin or something like that. I have where it's like it's my grandpa's sister's kid, whatever relation that is to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, he converted to Judaism for what he said. What he told my grandpa was for business reasons.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah. Well, and he did marry a Jewish woman. You know, it's
Okay,
he just,
sure.
like, brought a bunch of business cards to the synagogue or whatever. But yeah, he that was his reason. You know, and of course, my grandpa was always like one of the most liberal people, you know, at his church that he went to.
Yeah.
There's this famous story where the Republican Party called him to like do a survey, and they're like, "What do you think about George W. Bush?" And this was when the pastor was over doing a visit, and my grandpa was like, "I think George W. Bush is the biggest jackass since Ronald Reagan." And he hung up the phone.
Whoa.
And the pastor's like in the room, you know what I mean? He actually is fairly liberal too, but you know, just to swear in front of the pastor. And that's my religious background, as you know. I was raised Calvinist, which is like definitely like the most fatalistic branch of Christianity. And also why my family has like a bunch of weird like Dutch traditions that we do, even though no one in the family is Dutch.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Something I did want to ask you about is, you know, you're talking about that self-deprecating humor. Something I have noticed, like anecdotally, and I'll get into one of these anecdotes later, is how often self-deprecating humor or humor is used to kind of like disarm anti-Semitism. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's this clip that I'm sure will get taken down fairly soon of Stone Cold Steve Austin, and he's interviewing Paul Heyman, who is a Jewish man. And you know, if you want to talk, there's actually a really cool academic article that everyone can look at that just like talks about how Paul Heyman, you know, was really the first person to kind of like subvert this kind of like Jewish ethno stereotype that exists in wrestling. And anyway, Stone Cold Steve Austin was interviewing him on his podcast, and Paul was like sharing, you know, a lot of insights about his experience, you know, as a Jewish person, and how he felt like it led to him, you know, becoming a manager in wrestling. And then just like super randomly, Stone Cold just like asked him if Jews really control the media. And he
hang out with us. I'm a Jew, and my people, we're not hunters, we're furriers. You know? I mean, you see, the whole crew's laughing now about that, especially the guy over there who's Jewish, because he knows. Because, you know, it's like, I can't kill the thing, but I can make you a nice lapel out of it.
Why don't you get into diamonds as well? How y'all in, as you would say, diamonds, the furs, a movie business? What's the deal here? It's a monopoly?
What? What?
Your people.
My people.
Yeah.
Well, we own everything.
I know.
The media.
How is that?
Well, because we're the smart people. We're the Jews. You know, I mean, we screwed up in the Middle East. You know, I mean, and we did. I mean, I can speak about this because I mean, we're supposed to be the chosen people, and here we, you know, and here we picked the only piece of land in the Middle East that has no oil on it. Everything we have is sand and the Mediterranean Sea, which for generations people have been trying to push us out into. You know, every Jewish holiday is the same thing. They tried to kill us and we're still alive. So, I mean, you know.
you know, something that's caused you a lot of pain and adversity, but like just the fact that people can be so thoughtless.
No, it's insanity, yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, that's exactly why, I'm not going to be watching WrestleMania this year. And it's really disappointing because I think I told you, you know, that there was a wrestler that was going to debut in AEW, and all these anti-Semitic conspiracy theory stuff like popped up.
Right.
And immediately was yanked off the show, where it's like, you know, this clip of Stone Cold asking, you know, Paul Heyman, like, do Jews control the media? And he's, you know, main eventing WrestleMania on a huge payday, you know. Well, he's not main eventing, but he's going to be hosting a talk show, or he's going to make an appearance on another wrestler's talk show.
Okay.
But regardless, like, to have someone with that track record. To say nothing of like, you know, Google Stone Cold Steve Austin domestic abuse. Like there's already reasons to not be super stoked on watching Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Right.
As much as I love the character Stone Cold Steve Austin, you know what I mean?
Sure.
It's like there's it just in my mind no place for it, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is the same company, and you and I haven't talked about this stuff at all. But the WWE is essentially like being bankrolled by all this like Saudi blood money.
Oh my God.
Yeah, to where, and you know, my listeners know there's a podcast called WrestleNomics that goes into this a lot better than I can. But essentially, if you look at the life of AEW's television deal with the Turner networks, they will make less money from their entire, you know, I think it's a 5-year TV deal than the WWE has made running like 2 shows in Saudi Arabia a year. It's a really crazy thing.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, and it's disgusting. But in any case, speaking of, you know, speaking the truth and authenticity, I want to talk to you a little bit just about CM Punk, you know, just because he was involved in this feud and is someone that it's like another person that I feel like you have a unique appreciation for.
Right.
And I talked about this on the show, you know, earlier this week. But it's just the idea that the thing that makes CM Punk great is when he is in like pursuit of the truth or in pursuit of authenticity. And I think that that's always something that like you and I have had in common.
Sure.
Because, and I'm sure you've encountered this too, you know, anytime you're working in any art form, you know, music, wrestling, what have you, there's always going to be people who, you know, it's back to this Bruce Springsteen quote that I've talked to you about, you know, probably thousands of times, you know, where it's like, you know, I don't want to be the most popular, I don't want to be the most famous, like I want to be the best.
Yeah, that's a great quote.
That's exactly, you know, CM Punk's thing. That's exactly, you know, your thing. I just feel like, especially nowadays, Mel, it really is so rare to find people that put value on like truth and authenticity and being real. Because, and that's why I'm really excited that you're putting that song Play Dumb on the record. Because I really do think it like perfectly encapsulates this dynamic of everyone does want you to play dumb to a certain extent. Well, not everyone, but most people, you know, they don't want to be disturbed.
Sure.
And that's what I found with like a lot of these issues that I've had, you know, with WWE or what have you. People want to just like sit back and enjoy. You know, they don't want to be bothered by, you know, hearing about like what's going on in Saudi Arabia and things like that. Yeah. So this is the craziest thing. I'm glad I'm talking to you about it because I usually talk to people that like know about all this stuff. You know what I mean? They actually, like, the last pay-per-view that they did in Saudi Arabia was called Elimination Chamber.
Oh my God.
And it's like, did they leave, like, the chamber behind for them to, like, put journalists in?
Oh my God.
Like, and it's one of those things where, like, the way that they, or many WWE fans explain away, you know, including Vince himself, is just going to that, like, cultural relativism thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like no one is criticizing the fact that, like, you know, when the wrestlers wrestle over there, it's like the female wrestlers have to wear, like, gigantic black T-shirts and stuff like that. No one is saying that they shouldn't be doing that. It's just there's a big difference between, you know, all the women wrestlers having to, like, cover themselves up and, you know, beheading journalists. Where I think cultural relativism is good, you know, and can... is definitely something that can explain away a lot of things. But there are just things that obviously cross the line. Yeah. So that's my brave stance against beheading journalists, Mel.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to take a stand on the topic of the day.
Yeah, that was a really disturbing. I feel like did that happen like right before the pandemic?
They did run some shows, right? I believe it was actually
No. I mean, I guess I mean like the first big publicized case of I guess beheading.
Oh, yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, and that's what their whole. I mean, that's what a lot of this stuff is Saudi Arabia trying to put like a good public face on.
Yeah, it was just wild.
And that's why there's all this stuff where the WWE made a bunch of women that work for them all post this billboard that had two, women wrestlers on it because they were, one of the headlining matches in the pay-per-view. And the WWE forced, obviously, a bunch of their female employees to post a picture of this billboard with the caption, WWE continues to change the world.
Oh my God.
Like, is this not I'm not I'm trying to think of the best word for it, but you know me, man, I just post pictures of shit on Amazon on my Instagram, I'm not I'm not someone that is anti, all corporations or whatever.
For sure.
Although I am on some level, I suppose, but I'm just saying, I don't think that all corporations are evil. I just, in particular, think that this actually is one of the evil ones.
Right.
And that's why it was so funny, I talked about this too a little bit, is just that Ringer partnership where it's the Ringer partnered with Spotify and WWE.
Yeah.
It's kind of like really, those are the two corporations that your podcast is going to be bankrolled by?
Yeah. Like Raytheon.
Yeah, Lockheed Martin.
Yeah, right.
Now that's something that you should look into, a Lockheed Martin.
Yeah. Maybe.
They could probably use it. I think.
Yeah, maybe something a little Beatlesque.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, nostalgic.
Yes. I should maybe look into that. There was something I was going to say. I think that I just maybe wanted to clarify something I said, which is I think that just to really answer your question head on about a lack of allyship, I just think it's difficult for people who aren't Jewish to empathize with the quote unquote Jewish plight. And so I think that that's why you really have to kind of explain to a lot of people what the situation is, and then maybe after 30 minutes I feel they can be oh, okay, that sounds pretty bad, and
sure,
obviously you learn about the Holocaust and you read Diary of Anne Frank and stuff in elementary school or middle school, but it's just I don't know. There's just it feels like there's just kind of a very superficial awareness of Jewishness, and especially
Nazis,
American Jewish. Right.
It's easy for it's just like me being really didn't that beheading thing. You guys went too far with it. Where it's everybody wants to be fuck Nazis, but when it comes to actually taking a stand for someone in your own community, that's a much different proposition.
For sure. And I think that's something else we could kind of talk about is the Nazi thing. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't talk about this. I don't know. I think that, it's interesting how Nazis have become kind of a catch-all for bad people or whatever, when it really suggests a specific hateful ideology, and I think that there are times where I'll see fuck Nazis patches or whatever, and it'll be a swastika with a line through it, and I think that as somebody, I think that that's just another kind of its own type of obliviousness about Jewishness. I think that's something you see a lot in the Pacific Northwest, because it's like a Jew doesn't really want to see a swastika in any context. Like if I pass like a bar, like there's a bar in Portland with like a swastika with a line through it, like on their front door, and it's like there is just something really kind of like visceral about seeing a swastika like on a door in like a public space, and it's like, in my opinion, you have to be kind of like a dipshit to not understand that. But I think that really kind of like captures like the I guess you could call it like tone deafness of like people like Goyam, I guess. But also my experience is like in Portland mainly. You know, I think that it's like pretty different in other places I've been. But because I grew up here, that's like my perspective.
Well, I think if you stop and think too, you know, thinking about, I mean, Portland is obviously going to be, you know, different than, you know, like you're saying, you know, LA or cities on the East Coast.
Right.
But I think that, you know, there's probably a lot of other regions in the country where it's probably a pretty similar experience, I would imagine.
Yeah, totally.
It's really interesting because, you know, I live just down the street from like the big Jewish community center here.
The community center, yeah.
Yeah, in Southwest Portland, you know, especially, you know, before they built that, because they built that section of the 405, like that basically just like demolished like the oldest Jewish neighborhood in Portland. That's like, yeah, if you look at the history of the Portland, and especially Portland, but the Oregon freeway system, it's basically like, oh, okay, so we're going to build this freeway through the black neighborhood? Or the
totally.
Which is crazy to look back on. You know, there's that freeway that was going to be built that was like, why am I talking so much about old freeways in Portland?
You know what's weird is that is also my like borderline autistic interest. I think we may have like both come to this organically and like independent from each other, which is really bizarre because I have also been like reading a lot about freeways, and before you even said anything, I knew you were gonna start talking about like the ghost freeways in Portland. Is that what you're gonna mention? Yeah. Well, I don't know who it's more embarrassing for.
Long like YouTube deep dives. Because this guy that has all these like, and I don't know why, but like he's got like all these, and he doesn't even seem to be based in Oregon, but he has all these videos like explaining like you're saying, the ghost freeways.
I wonder if we're watching the same guy.
I think we probably are.
Yeah, because how many of these guys are there?
It's honestly a little terrifying. You and I are both finding out that we've been really into freeways lately.
Yeah.
It's really a miracle that, like, I have 2 kids, Mo. That means I got laid twice, you know? It's really pretty incredible.
Yeah.
That's why I have the 2 kids, you know? I had to prove people on
the freeway thing is just crazy. Is this the same channel where the guy he goes to like the ruins of Vanport?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that shit is crazy. Where he's like standing on it's like the foundation of the movie theater in Vanport or whatever.
Totally.
Yeah, that is. I mean, I think also like it's probably because we both grew up here, and that stuff like is probably. I don't know. I think you like reach a certain age where you like want to know about. I don't know. I feel like it's like maybe not that strange to have like some interest in Portland history or whatever.
Well, especially